Hi everyone, this is the start of my series getting started with Terraform for Azure. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take you through everything you'll need to know to follow along with any of my future videos, and the future videos will cover specific topics and creating specific resources using Terraform, but this one's just going to provide you a basis so that you can get started. So first off, I'm just going to cover what Terraform is and its benefits, any of the different tools you need, what a Terraform provider is, and also what Terraform State is, as well as how to configure storing it on Azure. This course is going to be heavily focused on Azure with Terraform, so if you're wanting some other different providers, I think there will be other tutorials out there that are better for you. I might expand on them in the future, but for now it's mostly just going to be focused on Azure. I'll have some chapters set up in the description below so you can skip ahead at any point, and all my code's going to be available on GitHub so you can check it out there. So you've found this tutorial, so I expect you at least have heard of Terraform, but I'm just going to cover basically what Terraform is. It's basically infrastructure as code tooling so that you can automate setup and updating of your infrastructure, and you can keep track of the changes in a version control system like GitHub. It's easy to set up different environments in the exact same way because you're doing it based off a configuration file. And Terraform itself is an open source command line tool that can be used in your build pipelines for free. So it's got a really large community behind it, and it's quite well known in the industry and quite heavily used. You may be wondering, why would I use Terraform? So some of the main reasons are that you can track your changes in a version control system, and that basically means that you can see if anyone's made changes to your infrastructure and you've got a history of any changes. So if your live server slows down, you can go and actually check, has any of the settings for my infrastructure changed? And if so, maybe you can change it back. You can also replicate infrastructure very easily across environments because it's all just specified in a config file. So you can get the exact same setup across different environments, and that can sort of make sure your life is a bit easier because you don't have things working in one environment and not another purely because of the infrastructure you're on. And you can also save time manually provisioning in that you don't need to go to Azure and manually set up all your different resources. You can define them in the config file, and in the build pipeline you can run the Terraform commands that will automatically set them up and update them. You can also work across multiple cloud providers. So you may just work with one cloud provider and have everything on one cloud provider like Azure or AWS or even Google Cloud, but you could actually provision things over multiple cloud providers. So say you've got some pricing benefits and some particular features you like to use in one cloud provider, there's nothing stopping you from using that cloud provider and also using another cloud provider alongside that. So it sort of gives you some sort of flexibility there and doesn't lock you into one specific vendor. If you're using ARM or Bicep, for example, to automate your Azure deployments, you are very tied into Azure because they only really work for Azure. It also gives you a quick infrastructure overview, so you can sort of see by looking at the config file exactly what infrastructure you have set up without having to go to the portal. Maybe you don't have access to the portal if you're just a developer, and so yeah, it's quite good because you can sort of see what you've got and how it's sort of working together without actually having to go to the portal. And also one of the big benefits is it does have a really large community. So if you face any issues, it's usually pretty easy to find someone who's encountered the same thing and sort of learn from them. And that just comes with it being open source, and from that it's also become well documented and simple to learn. So it's quite a good one to use, and that's why a lot of people in the industry use it for automating their infrastructure. So now that you're sold on using Terraform, here's a few things that you're going to need to install. So firstly, the Azure CLI is going to be necessary for working with the Azure provider if you're just going to be working locally. Basically what that's going to be able to allow you to do is to log into Azure, and that will allow Terraform to pick up where you're actually wanting to provision your infrastructure. You're also going to need to install the Terraform CLI, and there are a few commands that you're going to be able to run from that. So the first one's Terraform init, which basically prepares a working directory, and then you've got a Terraform plan. That's very similar to apply, except it just shows the pending changes. It doesn't actually make the changes. Whereas a Terraform apply will show, and once approved will make the changes. Then finally you have Terraform destroy. So basically, if you've come to the end of using your resources, you can just run the Terraform destroy command and it will pull everything down. And that's great because sometimes you're just wanting to do like a proof of concept or something, or maybe your product's hit the end of its useful life. Maybe you're not quite ready to go live, so you don't want to be paying for Azure resources while you're waiting for the product go live date, in which case you can just add that Terraform destroy command, and when you're ready to go live, you can pull that out of your build pipeline and you'll be ready to go. You're also going to need a login to the Azure portal, so that's just basically so that you can pay for your infrastructure that you're provisioning. I think you can get a free trial of that, and if you have an MSDN subscription, you often get a free amount of credit. I think it's $50 per month, and that's been more than enough for me to have a play with it. So yeah, that's how you will get started. You're going to need to install those few things, and now I'm going to take you on to a bit more of the technical information inside of things. So first up, you're going to need to create a Terraform file. That's basically a file with the .tf extension. And what you're going to do in that is specify all the configuration for what providers you're going to need, which basically specifies which cloud providers you'll be working with. A Terraform provider defines the resources available to work with and that you can provision. So like, for example, a resource group in Azure, or like a PostgreSQL server, or an Azure container instance. So yeah, if you're working in Azure, you'll only need to specify that provider, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. So basically you've got your tutorial.tf file, and if you go over to the Terraform documentation, I'll link this in the description, it will show you how to set up your provider. The reason I'm linking in the description is that you've always got the most up-to-date provider, and so you're going to be working with the most up-to-date code, because Terraform does change a bit. It is regularly maintained and updated, and also all the cloud providers are forever adding new features. So yeah, it's good that you head over there to get this rather than just using exactly what I've specified, because things change over time. Then you're going to want to write that AZ login command. I'm not going to run it. I'm already logged in. But if you don't run that command, then basically it's just going to... it's not going to allow you to provision anything. And then you want to run a Terraform init. That's just going to go ahead and install a few things. And once that's done, you're ready to start applying, planning, and destroying any infrastructure you've created. So I'm going to do a Terraform plan command. I don't actually have any resources I'm setting up here. You can see I've just specified what providers I want, which is just the Azure provider. If you had additional providers like AWS, you could also add those in, but I just don't. I'm going to be working purely with Azure for the purposes of this series. When you run your Terraform apply command, it's actually going to go and create a Terraform State file. What this is basically storing the state of your provision infrastructure, and it'll map configuration in your Terraform file to real-world resources. For example, say you specify that you want to create a resource group inside your Terraform file, it'll map that to the actual Azure Terraform file. So these are stored locally in terraform.tf state files. However, in larger teams, it's best to store this remotely. You don't really want to store this in version control systems, as sometimes it can have any secure keys because it needs to know about the state. I'm going to show you how to set that up in Azure Blob Storage right now. So first off, you're going to want to go ahead and create your storage account and give that a name. So I'm just going to call mine MC Terraform Tutorial. Then you can specify pretty much any properties you want to for this thing. I'm just going to call this storage account name MC Terraform Tutorial. Once again, it's just going to line up with that resource group name. And I'm going to specify that I want cold because it's infrequently accessed. It's just going to be accessed whenever I deploy new infrastructure, and I'm not planning on having this run constantly. So once that's run, it'll go, and once you click create, it'll go ahead and start the deployment process and create the resources. And once that's done, you can go to the resource, and you're going to want to set up a container that's going to storm the Terraform State file. So you can just click that little plus container button and give it a name. So I'm just going to call this MC Terraform Tutorial and create. So it's just going to go and create a container that I can store my TF state file in. And now I can go back to Visual Studio Code and specify the code I need to actually store it there. We could have provisioned that storage container inside the Terraform file, but I think it was a bit overkill. It's something we're going to set up once this time, so let's not worry too much about that. So here we go, we'll store Terraform State on Azure in storage container. We're going to specify this Terraform bracket, and backend is the Azure RM. We're just going to specify all these properties that align with what we've just set up in Azure. So we've set up a resource group with name MC Terraform Tutorial. We set up a storage account with the name MC Terraform Tutorial, but without the hyphens. And we set up a container with the name MC Terraform Tutorial also. This is basically telling Terraform where it can go ahead and store that state file. And the key is just going to be our Terraform state file name, terraform.tfstate. That's basically going to do everything you need to do so that the Terraform state file is stored remotely and not locally. You should also add to your git ignore that you don't want to check in your Terraform TF state file, just so that there are no mistakes that happen there. If I run a Terraform init, it'll go and initialize the back end. I can run a Terraform plan or a Terraform apply here. If I run the apply, it's really just going to do nothing because I've actually not specified any resources to create yet, so there's no state to actually store. So you can see 0 added, 0 changed, and 0 destroyed. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Once again, this code's all going to be on my GitHub, and I'll link in the description to the updated Azure RM provider on Terraform documentation. There'll be more tutorials to come, so please like and subscribe for more content.